Welcome back to Detection Dispatch, a podcast all about what really matters in the detection engineering world. I'm your host, Alex Hurtado, and today we're tackling a topic that every SecOps team is probably thinking about, and that is understanding detection engineering and why often many teams are struggling with it. And with me today, I'm very honored to be joined by JP, a very seasoned detection engineer who's been very deep in the trenches, seeing it firsthand why so many SecOps teams are struggling with it, going through it, and really going through the thick of it. And so he's going to be breaking it down with me on why it's a challenge, some of the latest trends that we're seeing, and how they approach their detection strategy, and also how this role has evolved because he's been in it, right? JP, thank you so much for joining the podcast, by the way.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
You've seen this role evolve, and so why don't we kick off by telling us who you are and how this role has evolved, what you do, what you're working on, and we'll get right into the thick of it.
Well, as you mentioned, my name is Jimmel Peters. Most everyone just calls me JP, and I am a cyber threat detection engineer for a major media company. And just to give a disclaimer that the information shared is my own thoughts and it's not, any representation of any business entity or organization in general. I've been in cyberspace for about 6 years, but as a detection engineer for a little under a year. I've been involved in a lot, getting exposure to so many different things. And I see where there's lack, where the community can grow. I've seen just different things across the board, just having that high level overview of the field and the exposure that I've been able to get. So
yeah, you're in the weeds. You've been fine tuning alerts, right? You're making sense out of what can be kind of a madness. That's our world, the world we see every day, and really what fuels not only the heart of dispatch here. I love bringing together folks like you, JP, to talk about this kind of work and people who are very motivated by this work and really love what they do. So really appreciate you joining the pod. And as many of you know, we are in collaboration with SANS. We're cooking up and we're really, really close to completion of the official inaugural State of Detection Engineering report, to which a lot of the data points in there are not only exciting, but also highlight that this work is not just a niche function anymore, right? We're seeing this role becoming a core pillar of what modern security operations should be. And they're not just talking about detection engineering, they're actively investing in it, with 80% of enterprises investing in detection engineering as a critical part of their business. So it's at the board level and it's becoming a foundational strategy. Despite all of that great investment and all of this great traction and rise of detection engineering roles, I see them all over LinkedIn, actually, like left and right. Actually, I saw a new role that's called adversarial engineering, which was, I think it's pretty much detection engineering. But despite all of that, teams are still struggling with it. Their teams are still struggling to get it right. So why don't we talk about why detection engineering is so critical, first of all, and then we'll get into some of the struggles from both a technical and a business standpoint.
as detection engineers, we help organizations rapidly identify and respond to security incidents and events before they become major incidents. I've just put together 4 reasons why they're so important. And one is early threat detection. Organizations can identify threats early, and that helps reduce the impact of an attack or just different attacks that may come.
And by early, do you mean by the time you're at the exfiltration state, it's too late? A little bit more earlier in the attack path?
Yes.
Got it.
Hopefully at the beginning, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yes.
Some of those early signs, right?
Yes. And also working on reducing those false positives with the incorporation of tunings and different things like that. We can help minimize the noise so we can actually focus on those detections that are truly genuine threats. And also with adaptability, these organizations have to adapt and we have to evolve, because the attacker tactics are evolving. They're new, they're fresh, and there's always new things coming out. Just keeping ahead of that so we can do our jobs.
The threat landscape is evolving, but also the business is evolving too. There's acquisitions left and right. There's new, the marketing team will now realize they need a new SaaS application, and now that creates a new source of telemetry. Also inside of our business, it's evolving and adapting too. And I think we should be able to have a detection engineering team that can take on those constant changes, because boy, they're gonna keep coming.
Yes, they're going to keep coming. For
Exactly.
sure.
I love how you said that. Also, the false positives piece, especially for targeting more of the earlier attack paths, like tampering with records or tampering with sensitive material, sensitive repos, like that tends to be very noisy in nature because they could be very legitimate uses of changes, and figuring out what is malicious between that is always going to, populate and create a lot of alert volume and a lot of false positives. How often are they actually legitimate? I mean, if looking at all of your alerts,
I
one,
mean,
yeah,
like the approach that we should take in regards to like dealing with a lot of false positives is
yeah,
just to have well like team check-ins, like have like
yeah,
SOC team check-ins where like speak with the SOC, say, hey, what are the noisy alerts that you're seeing in the organization? How can we help with like tuning those out? And
yeah,
just also as a proactive approach as well, where like we can actually go in and look at those like different alerts and see what fired, see why it fired, see if there's a high, like false positive rate, and then create like a more tailored and like fine tuning to like make sure that like every time this alert like does fire, it's a true positive and not a false positive.
yeah. And I guess that's where the detection engineering role is. That role isn't about just responding to tactical alerts anymore. It's just about thinking more strategically about, well, what can you do? What can you correlate? What can you think on a more sophisticated level so that you can target those higher fidelity, more correlated scenarios rather than just, every time somebody, an RDP login or an SSH is created, like those discrete type of things that are very noisy in nature. But as far as like the detection engineering aspect of it, I think as well, we've seen that evolve. So I know you've been a part of it. You've been a detection engineer for a very long time. How have you seen your role change, maybe yourself, or maybe how have you seen it within your peers? How has that changed?
Well, I would say just off the bat, with the integration of AI and like machine learning in general, it just
Mm,
opened up the floodgates where there's so much more that can be done. We can leverage AI and machine learning algorithms to actually like enhance our threat detection capabilities. And these technologies are super helpful. It's a bit scary too, but it's
it
super
is.
helpful and it opens up a whole new world. Also, with enhanced threat intelligence, I've seen that where we have more of a defined process where threat actors are being realized, documented, and it's more of a tailored approach where
Yeah.
we're able to do more. So over the past year, I would say it's definitely some focus areas around behavioral analysis where we're looking at systems and user behavior. And if like different things happen outside of a user's scope, that is indicative of a possible security incident. If you see the user log in, I don't know, in like, well, like in like New York, New Jersey,
Hmm.
like the like tri-state area all the time, and then all of a sudden you see them logging in from like Sweden. You're like, okay, what's going on there? So those like behavioral things, like definitely, just I see an advancement in that as well, just over the past year.
The detection engineering role is turning very strategic in terms of their preference on like behavioral approaches, right? Rather than the typical, those the what you mentioned. Why do you think that there's more of a preference for behavior analysis versus threat intelligence, like searching for a known indicator? There's this preference we saw in the STANS detection engineering report data that the number one top preferred detection is behavioral detection. So why do you think that is?
Well, because it's the future.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier for the system to pick up on something that we may not see.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're just in an organization with hundreds or even thousands of assets, how do you find the malicious like behavior, like within all those different like just like assets and like just network logs and different things like that. So having those behavioral things in place gives us the edge. We can put things in place and say, if this were to happen outside of, okay, we know this user like logs in at this day at this time consecutively for the past 6 months, and then all of a sudden they're like logging in like late at night from different location. That shows, okay, something's off. So just having that visibility definitely helps. So that push for more behavioral analysis is definitely key, and that's why a lot of organizations are pushing in that direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that also helps us target the unknown. Instead of looking for something that you already know it's bad, it's also looking for things that maybe they're not publicly available, but it's very likely that it could be. And it's very risky in nature and it needs to be addressed and verified. We don't have a public registry of all of the TIs. And also, those things go outdated really quickly, the threat intelligence incidents and IOCs and things like that. So relying on behavioral analysis is still going to be a thing now and in the future. I don't think we're ever going to get away from that. That's why we're still struggling because behavioral analysis can still lead to false positives. Do you think that's why so many security teams struggle with it? Why do so many security teams still struggle with detection engineering, even though it is a more strategic role?
I believe the biggest reasons why security teams struggle with detection engineering is because it's often viewed like well as an afterthought. It's usually something that's done after like an incident occurs,
Mm,
not a proactive approach where it's like built in, to the function. It's more of like a bolt-on approach instead of a
hmm.
built-in approach. So
Yeah, but so if we break it down, but the technical and the organizational challenges, what is the biggest technical reason why teams face such struggles with it?
well, I would say the biggest like reason is just they both on approach as as opposed to being built into the security function,
Yeah.
whereas they're not maintaining a proper protection library of rules and different things.
Mm,
We have situations where I've seen, like incident responders like function as detection engineers usually after like an event or incident is realized. So having more of a proactive approach, a structured approach when it comes to tunings, proactively like building those like detections beforehand, as opposed to just waiting for something to happen and say, oh, we have a gap here. Let's put something in place to prevent us from getting attacked again. So just
yeah.
having more of a proactive approach, I think is the biggest thing because the field is definitely a proactive field where we're building things before they happen.
Yeah.
Just having that approach, I think is key.
Yeah, I think having no real approach to maintaining a detection library or not being on top of fixing what's broken and having no plan in place and prioritizing those things, that's going to put you in a really sticky situation. But why do you think that some security teams fail to operationalize their detections effectively?
I think they failed to operationalize their detections effectively because it's not really like taken seriously. I
Okay.
feel like it's more of a ad hoc approach like, to it instead of a like function that is a core function for the team. Also, with the incorporation of AI or machine learning, we tend to focus on the bare minimum and add on things that are not relevant. Having more of a proactive approach, I think is key, and
Yeah.
incorporating that as a built-in function as opposed to it being bolt-on is ideal.
I agree. There's so much to operationalizing a detection because it's not just about you create it and then you just turn it on and you just let it sit, right? Just like anything, you have to keep it healthy, you have to keep it nurtured, and that requires some effort and even a whole life cycle around it. However, doing that at scale when your team is managing thousands and thousands of detections across different domains, across different data repos, across literally introduce all these factors, like it's not easy. I'm comforted by the fact that detection engineering is gaining serious importance at the board level. Detection engineering is now getting funded. Now it's time to do something about it. Have you seen success with reporting your team's wins to the board? Because it's been hard to collectively prove from a metric standpoint the kind of impact you do when you have to do so much every single day. Things like mean time to detect an attack or mean time that it takes your team to build a detection. That is now where we can start showing a lot of impact as detection engineers. Now that it's getting funded, we can make it count. And I think that we're not going to get turned away if we show some serious ROI, like improving coverage or reducing mean time to detect. Now I feel like that's what we're going to be held up against to do at the detection engineering level. Have you seen those drastically improve your metrics?
Yeah, just overall, just like speaking with different organizations or teams, I do see an increase where they're seeing the importance of this field. Before it was more of an afterthought. Now they're
Hmm.
seeing the need more and more. Just like speaking with different teams and different organizations, or just like just doing research as just as far as what's out there.
I think that's so important from an organizational standpoint to just keep evangelizing and promoting, even if it's just internally, that coverage quarter over quarter and year over year, and just quantify that impact that those detection engineers do every single day. You have to communicate that value up and down the organizational chart and always recognize the people that are crucial to making it happen. That's something that we really want to amplify, by bringing bringing this report to the community and getting everybody to speak the language of impact. A lot of that is attributed to the grind that your detection engineer is putting in at like 8 p.m. on a Monday or 5 p.m. on a Friday when everybody can just shut their laptops. They're still there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that we got through the elephant in the room, JP. I appreciated these insights, and I know it's not always easy to talk about the hard stuff, but these are the kind of things that we should be talking about because we're all feeling them. We really are. But I have a couple more questions. Balancing signal versus noise when it comes to detections and burnout in alert fatigue. Any thoughts on that?
Yes, I would
Mhm.
say, and I think I alluded to this earlier, just like in regards to tuning, it's important to have that tuning in place and not just reactive tuning, but also a proactive approach to tuning, having different meetings with different teams who deal with the alerts that you build. Hey, what's working, what's not working, or just taking the more like proactive approach, saying, hey, let me go in and see what's going on. Let's see what fired, what's high fidelity, things that the team can actually proactively tune out before someone says, hey, this is an issue.
Yeah. So constant check-ins and incorporating all of those who were involved in the detection development process. And also, I think what a lot to do with that is there a trail that's being put in place that shows all of the changes that were done to that detection logic? Because a lot of changes can be added, but also like if the original author of that detection is long gone, you can't really call him up and ask him why that detection was put in the first place. So like an audit trail of the evolution of the detection logic is I think really key to have. And not a
Yeah.
lot of tools do that.
Yes, not a
Uh,
lot of tools do that, but there are definitely industry standard tools that do that. Like,
yeah,
like GitHub, for
like
instance.
GitHub.
Yeah.
Yeah, GitHub,
If
that's
you
literally
post a
the point of
repo,
GitHub.
every
Hmm.
time you make a change, you have the history showing everything that's been changed and when it was changed and who made the change. Just having that like visibility definitely helps because sometimes you may be looking at a detection that someone who no longer works with you built maybe 2, 3, 4 years ago. You know,
Right.
how do you get back into that and see what happened, or understand their thought process of what they did at that date, at that time, to recreate their thought process so you can properly address it in the present, day and age.
Security teams must collaborate with each other, but also digitally. We should have that kind of trail. What have you seen are the most common mistakes that we're making when designing these rules, in addition to maybe not documenting? But what other mistakes are you seeing?
I would say lack of testing and validation. Failing to thoroughly test and validate rules can result in undetected threats or a false sense of security. So it's important to like really test everything that you build because you don't want to push something into production thinking it works and it doesn't work. And then I don't know if an attacker, like leverages a certain thing that you should have a detection for, it doesn't see it and the attacker gets it undetected. So it's important to have those testing and validations in place.
That's a wild concept like, I wish I had that kind of confidence to be like, oh yeah, no, this rule's good enough, and then just push it. That's a wild kind of confidence. I have
Yeah.
crazy imposter syndrome all the time. Next time, I'm just going to think there's people out there pushing to production without test validation. I think I'm going to be okay.
But it happens a lot.
It's mind blowing. To end on a positive note, what is the first step that they should be taking to turn these things around?
I would say if that's the issue they're facing, the first thing they should do is go over all of their detections that they already have in production
Uh-huh.
and make sure that they work. Test
Yeah.
all of them. Come together as a team. Get your heads together and come up with a plan to test all of your detections and make sure that they work. And
Mhm.
also going forward to incorporate that practice of making sure that you always test and validate before pushing anything into production.
Validate under many different kinds of conditions because it can be with multiple different variables and factors.
Of course.
Yeah. Well, that I think that about goes through all of the elephants in the room at that point. I really appreciate you breaking this down with us, JP. You've seen the trenches, you've seen what they can do, and most importantly, there's a lot we can learn from that experience. So I want to end off on more on the community aspect. You've been a part of the community a while, and thanks to your content creation, for those of you that are listening, you can follow JP on LinkedIn. He's very active on showing all of the different keynotes he's a part of or speaking engagements, and he's writing some content. He's very active content creator to the community. But JP, what do you love most about this community, this SecOps community that we are all a part of?
I think what I love the most about it is the fact that I get to be a part of protecting society. What I mean by that is
Yeah.
technology has evolved exponentially over the
Yeah.
last like 15 years. And, we're not living in the 1970s or 80s where we're just protecting like computer systems. In today's day and age, we're literally protecting society. That's important.
Some people have very strong opinions about the internet making life worse, making society worse, and how it was more of a simple time before the internet. But it's honestly an incredible place, and we have a major part in protecting it. And is there anything you'd like to see more of in the SecOps community?
Yes, there's definitely something I'd like to see more of. And that's just more like security team collaboration across different organizations. We can share information, ideas, or concepts without compromising our respective organizations or security posture. If your team is struggling in an area, chances are there are teams out there that are thriving in it. We
They
need to
are.
bridge that communication gap because trust me, the attackers are collaborating.
Oh, they are. Absolutely. They're also using AI, malware as a service, ransomware as a service. They're also becoming famous in their own way. Like they've got marketing teams too, making their threat groups like household names. Like that's when you know you made it, when their threat group is a household name. Like it's wild. And it keeps this whole space exciting. So thank you so much for joining Detection Dispatch. You are always welcome to come back on the dispatch for any topics we in the detection engineering world should be talking about. It's evolved from a niche to a necessity to a function that is critical, a critical aspect of security, and it's a priority at the board level. So with that, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Stay tuned for our upcoming episodes with Andrew Van Vliet to talk about the Kuber roasting use case. Have a good
Thank
night.
you. Okay.